how much does Azure cloud migration actually cost? A realistic breakdown. Welcome back. Today's topic is how much does Azure cloud migration actually cost? A realistic breakdown. We'll cover what you actually need to know about Azure cloud migration cost. Let's talk about moving on to why Azure cloud migration cost varies so much. The short answer: scope is everything. Two companies with 50 servers can face migration bills that differ by 300% based on what those servers are running, how old the applications are, and what compliance requirements they carry. Application complexity drives cost far more than raw server count. A logistics company running a 12-year-old warehouse management system on SQL Server 2008 faces a completely different challenge than a financial services firm running containerized microservices. The first needs significant Azure app modernization work before anything can move. The second might be a genuine lift and shift to Azure candidate that closes in 3 months. 3 factors set the initial cost range. Now, next up, phase-by-phase Azure cloud migration cost breakdown. The 5 phases of Azure migration are assessment, design and planning, migration execution, testing and optimization, and steady-state operations. Each phase has a distinct cost profile, and the total Azure cloud migration cost is the sum of all 5. This is where Azure cloud migration services begin in earnest. An experienced Azure migration partner will inventory your current environment, map application dependencies, identify compliance gaps, and produce a migration roadmap. Companies looking to migrate on-premise to Azure often underestimate this phase, but shortchanging discovery is the single most reliable way to blow your total budget. What this phase covers. Next up, let's talk about what drives the price up: hidden cost factors. Most migration quotes undercount in the same places. These are the line items that inflate final project cost most often, and a reliable Microsoft Azure consulting company will surface them during assessment rather than mid-project. Azure app modernization is the single largest cost variable. Applications built before 2015 often assume on-premise infrastructure behavior, shared file systems, hard-coded IP addresses, local registry dependencies. Each of these breaks in cloud environments. Remediating individual applications costs $5,000 to $40,000 depending on complexity. Environments with 10 to 15 legacy applications can see this line item alone exceed the base migration budget. Moving data is not just copying files. Regulated industries need chain of custody documentation, data integrity validation, and sometimes dual run periods where both old and new environments operate in parallel. For healthcare or financial services companies, this adds $20,000 to $80,000 to migration costs depending on data volume and regulatory requirements. Next up, now, how much does Azure cloud migration cost by company size? The ranges below assume standard IT environments. Regulated industries typically add 30 to 50% to base costs due to compliance configuration requirements. These are total project costs, professional services fees plus first-year Azure infrastructure spend. Infrastructure typically represents 40 to 60% of the total, with services making up the remainder. For organizations running Microsoft technology stacks, Azure consistently comes out ahead on licensing. Applying Azure Hybrid benefit to existing on-premise licenses reduces compute costs by 40 to 60% compared to equivalent AWS instances. For enterprises already on Microsoft Enterprise agreements, this is the most underutilized cost lever in migration planning. For non-Microsoft workloads, pricing between the two platforms is comparable, and ecosystem fit matters more than rate cards. Let's talk about what an Azure managed services provider does after go-live. Migration is a project. Operations is ongoing. Many companies underestimate what post-migration support actually covers, and then find themselves either over-relying on internal teams or paying for services they could have scoped more precisely. A capable Azure managed services provider handles monitoring and alerting for performance, security, and cost anomalies. Patch management across OS, middleware, and application layers. Ongoing Azure cost optimization consulting to right-size resources as usage patterns mature. And continuous Azure security assessment against evolving threat models rather than a one-time compliance snapshot. For companies that migrated applications rather than just infrastructure, ongoing Azure DevOps consulting services keep pipelines healthy, deployments reliable, and release cycles short. Teams that invest in proper pipeline setup during migration typically ship code 40 to 60% faster within 90 days of go-live. Our post on Azure DevOps CI/CD pipelines walks through the specific patterns that deliver the fastest ROI. Now, let's talk about how to choose an Azure migration partner without overpaying. Not all Azure consulting services deliver the same outcome, and the cheapest quote rarely stays cheapest by project end. These factors actually predict project success better than price. Q Services is a Microsoft certified solutions partner specializing in Azure, which means the baseline technical competency is independently verified. But certification alone does not indicate whether a partner communicates clearly, scopes projects accurately, or handles the governance overhead that regulated industries require. It is a necessary filter, not a sufficient one. Before signing with any Azure migration partner, ask these questions directly. Now, reducing your Azure migration budget without cutting corners. Azure cloud migration cost is negotiable in ways most buyers do not realize. These levers genuinely reduce project cost without introducing execution risk. Not every application needs the same migration approach. A stable 3-tier web application might be a straightforward lift and shift to Azure candidate. A customer-facing order management system might justify replatforming to Azure App Service for operational benefits that pay back within 18 months. An honest Azure infrastructure assessment maps each application to the appropriate strategy, which prevents over-engineering cheap workloads and under-investing in critical ones. The biggest recurring savings come from decisions made during architecture design, not after go-live. Reserve capacity commitments reduce compute costs by 30 to 60% compared to pay-as-you-go pricing. Applying Azure Hybrid Benefit on eligible Windows Server and SQL Server workloads cuts licensing costs substantially. For a detailed breakdown of ongoing savings strategies, see Azure Cost Optimization: 7 Proven Ways to Cut Spending. Now, next up, conclusion. Azure cloud migration cost ranges from $40,000 for small environments to $1.5 million or more for complex enterprise migrations, with the honest reality that scope, application age, and compliance requirements matter far more than server count. The companies that end up with predictable migration budgets are the ones that invest in a proper Azure infrastructure assessment upfront, choose an Azure migration partner with structured delivery governance, and plan ongoing Azure cost optimization consulting as part of steady-state operations from the start. Q Services is a Microsoft certified solutions partner and has completed 500+ Azure and Microsoft platform projects since 2014 across healthcare, logistics, banking, and financial services. If you want a realistic cost estimate for your specific environment rather than a range from a blog post, our team can typically scope and return an initial assessment within 1 week. Contact us to start with a no-obligation discovery call.